I'll never forget the sound of the manager's voice when he told us to leave. It wasn't angry. It was worse. It was disgusted. He said our kind of pairing wasn't welcome in his restaurant. He was talking about us. Me, a white woman, and the love of my life, Jason, a black man, on our 2-year anniversary. We were a problem that needed to be removed. And in that moment, something in me broke. But what I did next, didn't just get us justice. It started a fire that spread across the entire country. My name is Chloe. I'm an artist. I see the world in colors, textures, and light. For 25 years, my palette was mostly bright. I grew up in a sun-drenched California suburb where diversity was a buzzword, and the biggest scandal was who forgot to bring the guacamole to the block party. My parents were loving, liberal, and taught me to be colorblind. It was a well-intentioned lie. I see that now. To be colorblind is to be blind to the entire lived experience of another person. It's to ignore the beautiful, painful, complex tapestry of their history. I didn't understand that then. I thought I was being enlightened. Then I met Jason. Jason was a splash of a new, vital, and profound color on my canvas. He was a first-year medical resident when a mutual friend dragged him to a gallery showing of my work. He stood in front of a large, chaotic abstract piece I'd titled Urban Pulse, his head tilted. Most people just nodded and moved on. He stood there for 10 minutes. "It's not chaotic," he'd said when I finally worked up the courage to approach him. "It's layered. I can hear the city in this. The honking, the snippets of conversation, the struggle, the joy. It's like a visual EKG of a living thing." No one had ever seen my work that way. No one had ever seen me that way. Jason saw layers. He was himself a man of beautiful, complex layers. He had a laugh that felt like coming home, a mind that was both fiercely intelligent and deeply empathetic, and a quiet strength that anchored everyone around him. He was also a black man who had grown up in Atlanta, the son of a teacher and a pastor, who had worked 3 jobs to get through college and med school. His world was not the sun-drenched, color-blind bubble of my youth. His world had texture and shadows and a history he carried in the set of his shoulders. Our 2 years together were the happiest of my life. He was my best friend. We built a small universe for ourselves in my messy art studio and his pristine, textbook-filled apartment. We were a team. I helped him de-stress after 48-hour shifts by dragging him to weird indie movies. He kept me fed and grounded when I was lost in a painting for days. We talked about everything, our fears, our dreams, the family we wanted to have one day. The idea of proposing to him wasn't a feminist statement. It was an impulse of pure love. He had just finished his grueling residency. The relief and pride on his face was a masterpiece. I had just sold my first major piece to a collector for a life-changing amount of money. We were both stepping into the futures we had worked so hard for. It felt like the universe was aligning. So I planned the perfect night. I made a reservation at La Belle Epoque, a restaurant so exclusive it usually required bookings months in advance. I'd gotten lucky with a last-minute cancellation. I bought a simple, elegant black dress. I slipped the ring, a sleek, modern band of tungsten and inlaid wood that reminded me of him, into my clutch purse. My heart was a hummingbird in my chest all day. When I saw Jason in his one good suit, my breath caught. He was so handsome, so solid. He took my hand, his thumb stroking my knuckles. "You look incredible," he whispered, his voice full of awe. "So do you, Dr. Mitchell," I teased back. La Belle Epoque was everything I'd hoped it would be. It was all soft candlelight, dark wood, and the gentle murmur of refined conversation. It smelled of expensive perfume and seared scallops. We were seated at a perfect little table in the corner. The waiter was attentive, the wine was exquisite. I felt like I was in a movie. We talked about the future, where we might live, how many kids we wanted. We were laughing, our heads closed together, lost in our own private world. I remember thinking, this is it. This is the peak of happiness. I reached for my purse under the table, my fingers brushing against the ring box. My plan was to ask after dessert. That's when the atmosphere shifted. It was subtle, like a drop in barometric pressure before a storm. The warm, golden glow of the room seemed to cool. I looked up and saw a man standing a few feet from our table, watching us. He was in his 50s, with silvering hair and a suit that cost more than my car. He had a manager's pin on his lapel. His expression was unreadable, but his posture was rigid. He approached. "Good evening. Is everything to your satisfaction?" His voice was smooth, practiced. "Everything is wonderful, thank you," Jason said, his smile genuine and warm. The manager's eyes did not smile back. They swept over our table, over our joined hands, and a flicker of something, disdain, disapproval, passed through them so quickly I almost missed it. "I'm afraid there's been an issue," he said, his voice dropping, becoming more intimate and more threatening at the same time. "I'm going to have to ask you to conclude your evening and vacate the premises." The hum of the restaurant seemed to fade away. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. Jason's smile faltered. "I'm sorry, an issue with what? Our reservation is under Mitchell." "The issue is not with the reservation, sir," the manager said, his gaze now fixed on Jason. "It's with the ambience you're creating. We cater to a clientele that has certain expectations for their dining experience. Your situation is making other patrons uncomfortable." The world narrowed to this man's face. The polite, venomous words, situation, ambience, patrons. "What are you talking about?" I asked, my voice sounding small and far away. The manager finally looked at me, and his mask of politeness slipped completely. His lip curled just slightly. "Madam, let's not make this more difficult than it needs to be. You and your friend need to leave. Now." The pause before friend was a deliberate, hateful thing. It was meant to diminish, to insult. It was meant to reduce the profound love I felt to something sordid and secret. I saw the change in Jason. I saw the light in his eyes dim, replaced by a weary, heavy understanding. It was a look I'd never seen directed at me before. It was the look of a man who had been here before, who knew this script by heart. He wasn't even surprised. That was what broke my heart the most. The resignation. He started to stand up, his movements slow, defeated. "Come on, Chloe, let's just go." But I couldn't move. The cold knot in my stomach had ignited into a white-hot fury. This wasn't just an insult, it was a desecration. He was spitting on our anniversary, on our future, on the ring still hidden in my purse. "No," I said, my voice trembling but loud in the now silent restaurant. Every eye was on us. "No, we're not going. You look me in the eye and you tell me why we're not good enough for your restaurant." The manager's face hardened. "You want the truth? Fine, we have a policy, we don't serve mixed-race couples. It's bad for business. It upsets the regulars. Now, are you going to leave, or do I need to call the police and have you removed?" The word policy echoed in the dead air. A policy, like we were a spill to be cleaned up. A stain. My artistic mind, which usually saw beauty, now saw the scene with horrifying clarity. The faces of the other diners, a sea of white, some looking away in shame, others watching with cold curiosity. The wait staff, frozen in place. Jason, standing there, bearing the weight of a humiliation I could only begin to imagine. My hands were shaking uncontrollably. I fumbled in my purse, my vision blurry with tears of rage. I wasn't looking for the ring. I was looking for my phone. "What are you doing?" the manager snapped. "I'm documenting your policy," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. I opened the camera app and hit record, pointing the lens at his face. Panic flashed in his eyes. "You can't do that. This is private property." "You made it public when you decided to be a bigot in front of everyone," I shot back. He turned and snapped his fingers at a busboy. "Call the police, now." The next 10 minutes were a blur of rising panic and surreal horror. 2 police officers arrived. The manager immediately went to them, speaking in a low, confident voice, pointing at us. He was the authority here. We were the disruptors. The officers, both white, approached our table. The older one looked at Jason, who was now standing protectively in front of me. "Sir, we've had a complaint. You need to leave the premises," the officer said. "We were just leaving," Jason said, his voice tight. "We're going." "He's not the problem, officer," I said, stepping out from behind Jason, my phone still recording. "The manager refused to serve us because I'm white and he's black. He said it's their policy." The manager scoffed. They were causing a disturbance, refusing to leave. He was becoming aggressive. It was a lie, so bald and brazen it stole my breath. Jason hadn't raised his voice, hadn't moved a muscle toward anyone. The younger officer looked uncomfortable, but the older one fixed his gaze on Jason. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to come with me." Why?" I cried. "He didn't do anything." "Disorderly conduct. Now, are you going to come peacefully, son, or are we going to do this the hard way?" The word son was a deliberate provocation. I saw Jason's entire body tense. He knew the drill. He knew that resisting, even verbally, could turn a bad situation into a deadly one. The fight went out of him. He held his wrists out. The cold, metallic click of the handcuffs was the sound that truly shattered my world. It was the sound of the after beginning. They led him away, his head held high but his shoulders slumped. He didn't look back at me. I stood there, alone in the middle of the restaurant, the manager's smug face burning into my memory. My phone was still recording, capturing my trembling hands and the silent, complicit faces of the diners. I was a statue of shock and fury. One of the waitresses, a young black woman, caught my eye as I was finally stumbling out. Her expression was full of a pained empathy, and she gave me a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. It was a small gesture, but it was a lifeline. It said, "I see you. This is wrong." I walked out into the cool night air, the ring still in my purse, the dream of the evening lying in ruins at my feet. I had gone in to propose a future, and I had walked out with a war on my hands. I drove to the police station in a daze, my mind racing. I called my father, a lawyer, my voice breaking as I explained what happened. "Stay calm, Chloe, don't say anything, I'll make some calls," he said, his voice tight with anger I'd never heard before. As I sat in the bleak waiting room, waiting for Jason to be processed, my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. It was a photo of my parents' house taken from the street. The message underneath was simple: "Drop it, or you'll regret it." The battle had just left the restaurant and come hunting for my family.
No one ever taught me how to diagnose the moment your own heart begins to shut down from the poison of hatred. I mean, they teach us in med school how to diagnose a failing heart. They check for arrhythmias, blockages, weak muscle tissue. But hatred is another poison that literally shuts down your heart. I felt it happening the second that manager looked at Chloe and me like we were something filthy. The crushing pressure, the slow, painful closing off. I was a doctor who couldn't save himself. And the worst part, I'd seen the symptoms my whole life. I just never thought I'd have to watch them infect the woman I love. My name is Jason Mitchell. For 28 years, I've been carrying a weight most of the people I treat will never understand. It's the weight of history, of suspicion, of having to be twice as good for half as much. I learned to carry it quietly, to make myself small, polite, unthreatening. It was a survival strategy passed down from my father and his father before him. "You can't win the war, son," my dad told me, his eyes tired. "You just learn to survive the battles." Meeting Chloe felt like laying that weight down. In her world, in her sunlit studio, I was just Jason, the man who loved bad sci-fi and knew weird medical facts. She didn't see the armor I wore every day just to walk down the street. She saw the person underneath. She was my sanctuary. That night at La Belle Epoque, I felt the armor click back into place the moment the manager approached our table. I knew that look, the cold, assessing gaze, the fake politeness that barely conceals disgust. I've seen it in store clerks and professors and attending physicians. My body went on autopilot. De-escalate, be small. Don't give them a reason. When he said we had to leave, my first instinct wasn't anger. It was a deep, soul-crushing weariness. Not here. Not tonight. Not with her. I just wanted to get Chloe out of there, to shield her from this ugliness I knew so well. I stood to go, ready to swallow the humiliation like a bitter pill. But Chloe, my brave, beautiful, furious Chloe, she stood up to him. She demanded an answer. And when he gave it, that vile policy, I saw her world break in real time. The confusion in her eyes was replaced by a dawning horror, and then a fire I'd never seen before. She pulled out her phone. My blood ran cold. "No, Chloe, no, don't poke the bear." The situation escalated exactly as I knew it would. The police, the handcuffs, The ultimate humiliation, being treated like a criminal in front of the woman I loved for the crime of existing while black. In the back of the squad car, I didn't feel anger. I felt a profound shame. I had failed to protect her. I had led her into the lion's den, and she had gotten mauled. The silence in our apartment that night was a living thing. When she showed me the threat to her parents' house, my worst fears were confirmed. This wasn't just about a dinner. This was about our safety. This was the war my father warned me about. "We have to drop it," I told her, my voice firm. I had to be the voice of reason, the protector. But Chloe, my artist who saw the world in right and wrong, couldn't comprehend surrender. We fought. It was the first time we'd ever raised our voices at each other. It wasn't a fight about love. It was a fight about two different realities. Her reality was one where justice was possible. Mine was one where survival was the only victory. When I woke up and saw she had posted the video, my heart sank. She had thrown a lit match into a gas tank. The explosion was immediate. The support was overwhelming, but the hate was vile and personal. They went after her art. They went after my hospital. The administration, all polite smiles and concerned nods, suggested I take a paid leave, a quiet way of saying I was a problem. Watching Chloe read the comments, her face pale, her hands shaking, was a special kind of torture. She was being brutalized for loving me. Every racist comment was a lash on my back. I was the infection, and she was getting sick because of me. The meeting with Angela Jones, the attorney, gave me a flicker of hope. She was sharp, confident. She had a plan. But as we left her office, the call from Chloe's mother shattered that hope. The threat was no longer digital. It was physical. Men were watching her parents' house. The fear was a cold fist around my heart. I looked at Chloe. "Please," I begged her, "we can still walk away." But she looked back at me, her eyes filled with tears and a terrifying, unwavering resolve. "We're not backing down," she said. "We're going to war." She had chosen the war over our peace. I felt the chasm open between us. That night, we slept on opposite sides of the bed, a million miles apart. The protest was a surreal spectacle. From our apartment window, we watched hundreds of people with signs chanting our names. It was empowering and terrifying. Chloe wanted to go down to join them. I refused. "It's not safe," I said, holding her arm. Then the counter-protesters arrived. The shouting, the chaos, the rock through the window. We watched it live on the news, and just like that, the narrative flipped. We were no longer the victims. We were the agitators who had destroyed a beloved business. Chloe crumpled onto the couch, sobbing. "They're twisting it. They're making it our fault." I didn't say "I told you so." I just felt a hollow emptiness. This was the game. This was how they always won. They provoked you, then filmed your reaction. They made you the villain for defending your own humanity. The online hate became a tsunami. My professional reputation was in tatters. Chloe's spirit was broken. We were losing. We were losing the public. We were losing our livelihoods, and I was terrified we were losing each other. The weight I had carried my whole life was now crushing us both. I found Chloe in her studio, staring at a blank canvas. She hadn't painted in weeks. "Maybe you were right," she whispered, her voice hollow. "Maybe we should have just walked away." It was the moment I dreaded. The fire in her was dying, and as I held her, I realized a terrifying truth. I would rather fight 1,000 losing battles with her than live in a world where she had learned to stop fighting. The real war wasn't against the restaurant. It was for her soul, and I was about to enlist. The turning point wasn't a legal victory or a public apology. It was seeing Chloe broken. The light that had drawn me to her was flickering, dimmed by the relentless onslaught of hatred. She had fought for us with everything she had, and the world had beaten her down. I had been so focused on protecting her from physical danger that I'd failed to protect her spirit. I found her in her studio, surrounded by the vibrant colors of her old work, but she was painting in grays. A hopeless, abstract smear. "Maybe you were right," she said, not looking at me. "Maybe we should have just walked away." I knelt in front of her, taking her paint-stained hands in mine. They were cold. No, I said, my voice stronger than it had been in weeks. You were right. Walking away is what they want. It's what they've always wanted from people like me. But you taught me that silence is a different kind of death. I called Angela Jones. What's our next move? I asked. How do we win? Angela had the firepower. The investigative journalist's exposé was a masterpiece of forensic journalism. It didn't just tell our story, it eviscerated Robert Laurent. It revealed the conspiracy, the paid provocateurs, the deliberate manipulation. It was all there in black and white. The public tide turned overnight. The Save La Belle Fund was exposed as a fraud. The city officials who had been silent fell over themselves to condemn the restaurant. The hospital director called me personally, reinstating me with a groveling apology. We went to court. This time I wasn't just a passive victim, I was a witness. When I took the stand, I didn't talk about the dinner. I talked about the cost. I looked at the jury, a diverse group of people, and I spoke from the heart. I spent my life learning to be invisible, I told them. To be quiet, to be polite, to make white people comfortable. I became a doctor to heal people, to be seen as a helper, not a threat. That night, with the woman I love, I was made to feel like a threat for the simple act of holding her hand. The greatest injury wasn't the arrest. It was watching the woman I want to build a future with learn a brutal lesson about the world that I had spent my life trying to shield her from. The defendant didn't just deny us service. He tried to deny us our humanity, and he almost succeeded. I saw jurors wiping their eyes. Chloe was crying quietly in the front row, her gaze locked on mine, full of a love and pride that felt like a transfusion of strength. The verdict was swift, guilty on all counts. The financial damages were historic, but the real victory was the public vindication. Robert Laurent was exposed as a bigot and a fraud. His restaurant closed for good. But the story wasn't over. A week after the trial, we were invited to a community meeting. It was filled with faces from the protest, local business owners, and the coalition of chefs. They unveiled the plans for the people's table. They asked for our blessing. Walking into the soft opening was one of the hardest things I've ever done. The memories of that night were a ghost in the walls, but the moment we stepped inside, the ghosts vanished. The space was transformed. It was warm, alive, vibrant. It was everything La Belle Epoque was not. It was healing. We were led to our table, the same corner. My chest tightened. But then I looked at Chloe. She was glowing, taking in the beautiful, diverse crowd, the smells of food that represented a dozen cultures. And then she did the thing I never expected. She got down on one knee. The world narrowed to her face, to the ring in her hand, to the overwhelming love in her eyes. The restaurant fell away. In the place where our nightmare began, she was offering me a dream. "Will you marry me?" she asked. The word yes was the easiest, most profound thing I've ever said. It wasn't just an answer to a question. It was a vow. A vow to stop just surviving. A vow to build, to fight, to love out loud, no matter what. The applause of the restaurant wasn't just for an engagement. It was a celebration of resilience. It was the sound of a community declaring that love is stronger than hate. They tried to deny us a seat at the table, so we helped build a new one. Our story isn't about a single act of racism. It's about the cascade of consequences that follow when you decide to fight back. It's about the cost, the fear, and the profound, healing power of a community that refuses to let hate win. If you find this story interesting, do remember to subscribe to this channel so you don't miss any interesting story.